It was a crime which pushed everything else off the front pages. 3 men, all known criminals, found shot dead in the Essex countryside. It was a cold-blooded, professional killing. The victims had many enemies, but which one wanted them executed?
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Now, interestingly, on this channel, one of the videos I've yet to create regarding the Essex Boys murders is actually the police interviews conducted with the 2 men who would ultimately be convicted of the murders of Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe. The following is my narration of the police interview with Jack Wombs. This interview is being tape recorded. The time now is 12:34 hours. The date is the 16th of the 5th, 96. We're in an interview room within the custody area at Grays Police Station in Essex. My name is Tim Wills. I'm a Detective Sergeant, collar number 68, stationed at police headquarters. The other officer present is Detective Constable 2034 Myhill, also stationed at headquarters, Central Detective Unit. Okay then, Jack. Now, the information on the sheet here relates to the 7th of the 12th, 95, when 3 people, Tony Tucker, Patrick Tate and Craig Rolfe, were found in a Range Rover in a secluded lane in Rettendon, Essex. All 3 had died of shotgun wounds. Our information suggests Michael Steele, yourself Jack, and Darren Nichols were at or near the scene of the murders at the material time. That's the time when we think it happened. And at that material time, the 3 murdered men had arranged to meet Michael Steele. In addition, Darren Nichols, since his arrest, has given an account of events on the 6th of the 12th, the day before the bodies were found. He has also given an account of events on the 6th of the 12th which directly implicates Michael Steele and yourself in the murders. Do you understand that? Yeah, I think I understand it. Do you understand what implicate means? In its loosest terms, basically then, to save you, all the hassle, Mr. Nichols is, in layman's terms, he's pointing the finger at you, Jack. Yeah. And Michael Steele, of being responsible for the murders of Tony Tucker, Pat Tate and Craig Rolfe. Do you understand? I do, yeah. Okay, so our intention then is to ask you questions relating to your part in these murders, Jack. We're going to ask you questions relating to, again, your actions and movements at the material times, your associations and contacts with people either personally, face-to-face, or by the telephone, okay? Yeah. Now, do you understand that? I understand that, yeah. Do you want me to read any of that sheet again? No. I think I've got that. Okay. So we're going to speak to you today about an importation that we believe you're involved in between the 1st of the 11th 95 and the 21st of the 11th 95. We will also speak to you about your implication in the murder of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe on the 6th of the 12th 1995. Do you understand? I do, yeah, understand, yeah. Good. Right. What we're going to be referring to, Jack, is a statement, okay? What I will say is that it's not a statement that has been served at this stage. It's one of literally hundreds of statements that have been taken, all of which are contained within a home's computer system. It's a statement of Donna Lynn Jaggers, aged 26. This is statement number 142A from the computer, made by Donna Lynn Jaggers, and it's not the only statement she's made. Do you know somebody called Donna Jaggers? No comment. Donna Jaggers was the common law wife of Craig Rolfe. Craig Rolfe was, as we've already discussed, one of the people that was murdered between the 6th and the 7th of December 95. I think what we're going to do is read straight from the statement and then ask a question around the content of that statement. So I quote here from the statement, "I learnt from Craig that a person called Mickey the pilot who I now know to be called Michael Steele, was a friend of Pat Tate, who in turn was a friend of Tony Tucker, end quote. Now, coming out of that statement for a minute, Jack, Pat Tate and Tony Tucker are the other two victims of the murder on the 6th or the 7th of December 95, and it continues here, quote, Steele I understood to be a pilot who brought drugs into the country, and I understood that he'd been in prison for it, end quote. Do you know Michael Steele? No comment. Okay, I'll continue. Craig told me that Steele was a ruthless person who really didn't think very much of other people. Would you describe Michael Steele as a ruthless person? No comment. Okay, I've moved on a couple of pages in the statement now, and I should point out that the date of the statement is the 14th of the 3rd, 96. I'm again quoting from it. The last deal which Steele carried out for them was approximately 2 weeks after Tate was released from prison, which was at the end of October 95, end quote. Do you understand that? I understand, yeah. Right. Craig told me that Mickey Steele was arranging to bring in £60,000 worth of cannabis from abroad. Craig put in £7,000, Tucker put in £20,000, and Tate and a fourth person called Barry Dorman were putting in the remainder of the money. Do you understand that? I think I understand, yeah. A couple of days before the cannabis was collected, I went with Craig to Tucker's home address in Fobbing, Essex, to hand him the £7,000. Then it carries on, and later on, a line or two later, the money was handed to Tucker, who was in turn going to hand it to Steele. We were only at the house for about 5 minutes, and as Craig and I were leaving and walking down the driveway towards our car, I saw Mickey Steele walking up the driveway towards the house. He passed by us and nodded to Craig. He did not speak to or acknowledge myself. Steele had come from a white car. It carries on, and jumping a line or two here, it states the following. There was a second male in the car who had short dark hair and appeared to be a little younger than Steele. He appeared clean shaven, but I did not take any further notice. Do you understand that? I understand what you're reading, yeah. Okay, so jumping forward again in the statement a few lines. A couple of days later, Craig told me that Steele had been arrested by customs officers whilst he was taking his boat from the water. This was following him dropping the cannabis off at a safe point on the coastline about 3 miles away. Do you understand that? Yeah, I hear what you say. That same day, Tate was arrested during the early afternoon, having crashed Tucker's Porsche car in Southend. Craig picked me up from work and told me what had happened to Steele. Do you understand that? I understand, yeah. And I can tell you that the day Tate was arrested in Southend, let's just check it was the 8th of the 11th, 95. Is it right that you were yourself arrested about that time by customs officers, Jack? No comment. Do you deny that you were arrested about that time by customs officers? No comment. Is it right that at 4:25 a.m. on the 8th of the 11th, 95, you were arrested at Felixstowe in the company of Mickey Steele and a man called Peter Corey? No comment. Okay, Jack. I mean, it just puts this statement in context, that's all. So I've just read from the statement. I'm going to go back over it, okay? A couple of days later, Craig told me that Steele had been arrested by customs officers while he was taking his boat from the water. This was following him dropping the cannabis off at a safe point on the coastline about 3 miles away. That same day, Tate was arrested during the early afternoon, having crashed Tucker's Porsche car in Southend. So, going back over it, that same day, Jack, you were arrested by customs officers. Tate, Mr. Tate, was in custody at Southend for an offence, I think, of drink driving. It continues in the statement here. Craig picked me up from work and I told him what had happened to Steele. About 1600 hours, Tucker phoned Craig on his mobile phone and told him about his car and what Tate had done to it. About 1800 hours that day, Craig and I drove to Southend Police Station to collect Tate. Once in the vehicle, I became aware that Tate already knew about Steele being arrested. He then used Craig's mobile phone to ring Jackie Street. He asked her if everything was safe. I took it that it was as a result of Tate's manner and subsequently what he said to Craig. He said that it was all safe. I took this to mean that the drugs had not been found. On this occasion, I did not know where the meeting between Steele and the others was to take place. But after a couple of days, Craig brought his share of the cannabis round to our house in Chafford 100. Because the cannabis had already been sold on, the same day, Craig and I took it up to the Golders Green area of North London, where Craig handed it over to a black male called Gary. Do you understand the content of the statement I'm reading, Jack? Yeah, you're reading me someone's statement. Do you understand what it's saying? Roughly, yeah. Is there anything that you don't understand about it? No, it's just going on for quite a while. It's a job to take it all in. No money was exchanged because the cannabis was what was known as laid on. Gary for him to sell and then pay Craig. The agreed amount per kilo worked out to be approximately £10,000 for the lot. Coming out of the statement now, we're talking about the cannabis that was imported, we believe, and landed just prior to your arrest by customs officers on the early morning of the 8th. It goes then. I learnt through Craig that Tate and Tucker were very agitated because Steele during this time was trying to push the price that he wanted up. That's for the cannabis that was imported, okay? I'm going to move back up a couple of lines now just to put that last bit in context. Already the others had placed their own share with other dealers, but very quickly they started receiving phone calls telling them that the cannabis was very poor quality. Basically, that the gear that had been brought in, a lot of it was crap. It was no good. They were getting it back from the people they had dealt it to. Do you understand what I mean by that, Jack? Not really. No. If I sell you something, you expect it to be of a certain quality. If it's not of a certain quality, then you give it back and ask for a refund. Do you understand the principle of that? Yeah, what you do in a shop, yeah? Yeah, that's correct. If it's gone mouldy, you give it back. Yes, Jack, and that's what we're talking about. So again, reading from the statement, they contacted Steele and told him that they wanted their money back because the cannabis was rubbish. Do you understand that? And they being Rolfe, Tucker and Tate, do you understand that? Yeah, I understand. Steele didn't want to take it back. Tate and Tucker then started putting real pressure on Steele to recover the money. By pressure, I mean through intimidation. I cannot say exactly what they did because I do not know, but I recall hearing conversation they had with Steele on the phone where they were ranting and raving at one another and pacing up and down. So basically, Jack, it shows a falling out between Mickey Steele and Tucker, Tate and Rolfe over the cannabis that was imported on the 8th of the 11th, 95. Do you understand the content of this statement, what I'm saying there? I hear what you're reading. Yeah. Do you understand what I'm saying? That we believe that Tucker, Rolfe, Tate were unhappy with Steele about the quality of the cannabis. Do you understand what I'm saying, Jack? Yeah, I understand what you're saying, yeah. Right. Back to the statement. I understand that Steele finally agreed to return the cannabis and get their money back for them. Tate, in a fit of temper about the whole affair, smashed each slab before it was returned. Steele had told them that a parcel the same size had been picked up by mistake, and that's how the problem had come about. Do you understand that? No. Right, well, my interpretation, Jack, is that Mickey Steele agreed to return the cannabis and give their money back, right? So he had to take the cannabis back from Tate, Rolfe and Tucker and give them their money back, for which they had paid for it. Do you understand that? Like taking damaged goods back to the shop? Yes, Jack, yeah. So Steele had told them that a parcel the same size had been picked up by mistake, and that's how the problem had come about. So Steele had offered an explanation to Tate, Tucker and Rolfe that he'd picked up the wrong gear, basically, the wrong cannabis. Do you understand that? Yeah, I think so. I think I do, yeah. Okay, Jack, so we're going to move back to the statement again, okay? Steele arranged to hand the money back to them on the continent. He was going to return the goods to his suppliers and then take the money to a pre-arranged location where he was to meet Craig, Tucker and Tate. Do you understand that? Yeah. Right, so a meeting was arranged between Steele, Craig, Tucker and Tate. The reason she refers to Craig is because it's her deceased common-law husband. A meeting is arranged, she says, between Mickey Steele, Craig, Tucker and Tate on the continent to return the money for the crack cannabis. Now, before we go on any further really, I just wanted to ask Jack what your relationship is, if any, with Michael Steele. No comment. Well, are you denying, Jack, that you know Michael Steele? No comment. Because I'm sure it will be documented in court, and we certainly have enough documented pieces of paper here to show telephone calls between Michael Steele, Mickey, whatever you want to call him, between him and your good self, via each other's mobiles, and also I would suggest you to his home address and him to your home address, either via mobiles or via landline phones. Can you explain to me how that can come about? Are you suggesting to me that this is a mistake, that there are numerous phone calls to one another's phone numbers by mistake? No comment. Because, Jack, it would seem to me that there's a man that you're arrested with on the 8th of the 11th on a beach near Felixstowe, and that you're not really saying anything about that at all. You don't even say to me whether you know Michael Steele, but I'm suggesting to you that you do, and it may be in fear that you're not saying anything. I mean, are you scared of him? Well, I mean, you're reading me these stories and going on about this and that, and I mean, I don't really know what you're actually implying. I mean, what are you implying? Well, well, tell me what you're implying. Well, I think what we're suggesting, and what I believe, is that Michael Steele was an importer of controlled substances. Drugs, cannabis, cocaine, whatever you want to call it. Mr. Steele is, as I understand it, an accomplished pilot, hence, no doubt, his nickname, Mickey the Pilot. He is an accomplished boatman, from what I understand, and obviously has some sort of intelligence as regard to these matters, and I'm suggesting to you, Jack, that you're his right-hand man, that whatever Michael says goes, because he seems to have some sort of hold on you, that you will do whatever Michael says. Jack, go there, do this. Oh yes, Michael. I'm suggesting that you are involved in the importation of controlled substances between these dates, between the 1st of the 11th 95 and the 21st of the 11th 95. We are suggesting that a deal was struck between Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe. Do you know them? No comment. Well, do you understand the question? Well, can you just finish what you're implying and I'll give you a response to it? We are implying, Jack, that a deal was struck between Michael Steele and yourself, Pat Tate, Tony Tucker, Craig Rolfe, to import a substantial quantity of cannabis resin from the continent, we believe Belgium, into this country, and that you are an integral part. Or perhaps I ought to rephrase that. You are involved. I can assure you that I'm not involved. I've got nothing to do with that. Why were you on the beach at Felixstowe at 4:30 in the morning on the 8th of the 11th 95? I can't really remember. It's probably a long time ago. I'm sorry, Jack. I don't want to be facetious, and I hope that you and your sister won't take it that way. But the 4th of the 11th is like, what, 6 months ago? I think I would have remembered if I'd have been arrested on a beach by a policeman at 4:30 in the morning. If you're saying you can't remember, which you've just said, then we're saying to you it seems unreasonable to me that you can't remember what you were doing somewhere at 4:30 in the morning 6 months ago when you were arrested. That's what I'm saying. Well, if you want to say that, but I asked you what you implied and I gave you an answer. I've got nothing to do with it. Okay, but what we're asking, Jack, is what were you doing on that beach when you were arrested at 4:30 in the morning? Well, there's no comment on that question. Alright, you don't want to tell us what you were doing there? No comment on that question. Right. And you don't want to tell us who you were with on that beach at 4:30 in the morning? No comment. Did you know that traces of cannabis were found on your boat following your arrest? No comment. On that morning? No comment. Do you own, and I'm not a boatman, I have to explain that straight away, but I think it's a rigid, inflatable boat? No comment. Because on that beach was an orange and black Yamaha Humber Autolude boat, a rib boat. Do you know what I mean by a rib boat? No comment. Because I understand that you've been seen on and refuelling such a boat. No comment. Whose was the blue Range Rover on the beach that morning, Jack? The Range Rover with the boat. It had an index of Delta Echo Sierra 36 Victor. No comment. What motor vehicles do you own, Jack? I'm sorry, I've omitted to ask you that. No comment. Do you own a motor vehicle? No comment. Do you drive? No comment. Because I believe that you are or have access to a blue transit van, Lima 98 Yankee Delta X-Ray. Is that your van? No comment. Or does that belong to G&T Commercials, who I think you work for? No comment. You're self-employed, Jack? No comment. I believe you're self-employed. You're a commercial engineer who has some connections with G&T Commercials that have a premises in Barham. Is that correct? No comment. And I believe that that van belongs to that company which I think you have had some dealings with. Do you also have a blue Range Rover? No comment. Okay. Peter Corey, do you know that man? No comment. He was arrested with you on the beach as well as Michael Steele that morning, wasn't he? No comment. If you could just bear with me a minute. I have a statement here from a PC 485 Cohen. Again, this is taken from a computer, so it's not the original statement, but this was or deals with your subsequent arrest on the beach on the 8th of the 11th 95, for which you were taken into custody and you were taken to Ipswich Police Station. Do you recall that? No comment. Okay, Jack. You're believed to be dyslexic, is that correct? Yeah, I think I'm dyslexic. You think you're dyslexic? I do have trouble with expressing my words, yeah. Have you had some form of treatment for this over the years? No. Have you ever been tested for it? No, I haven't been tested for it, no. Have you ever been to the doctors and expressed it? No. At school, did they notice it at school? I think they noticed it at school, yeah. So it's noted on your school reports and whatever? Yeah, I definitely have reading and writing problems, yeah. Right, but you do understand normal conversation? Yes, I understand, yeah. You're self-employed? I have a job taking information on. Yeah, I mean, you've read loads to me and, it just hasn't sunk in. Well, we have done, Jack, but what we've actually also done is asked you a lot of questions, short questions. Do you know Mickey Steele? Now, has that sunk in? Surely that's sunk in? What I'm saying is, if you're saying that you don't understand something, then tell us. Don't just sit there and then say months later that you didn't understand it. Now is your chance if you don't understand something. I understand what you're saying to me. So you understand things like, well, I understand English. When we ask you short, concise questions like, do you know Mickey Steele? You understand the question. Well, I don't wish to answer. Right, okay. What I'm just trying to define, Jack, is that there's a difference between not wishing to answer and not understanding the question. That's what I'm trying to define, okay? Okay, yeah. And to clarify, Jack, I would suggest that yes, perhaps a fair amount has been read to you and spoken about, but I did clarify, did I not, that we are alleging that you are in cohorts. You are involved with Michael Steele in the importation of drugs into this country. I encompassed that, didn't I? So there isn't really anything that's unclear at the moment, is there? No. Great, thank you. This is a statement, as I said, from PC Cohen, and it dealt with an event that took place on the 8th of the 11th 95, for which you were arrested, and it happened at 2:40 AM on the Wednesday the 8th of the 11th. This PC went round about Felixstowe Ferry because it had been reported that 3 men were landing a boat in suspicious circumstances. As we stood checking the vehicle, a man who identified himself appeared from a slope running over the embankment and spoke with us. He said that the vehicle was his and he'd been out with the boat. Do you recall that? No comment. This gentleman explained that he'd been out on the boat with his brother John Womes diving, and he said that the third person was Gordon. When further questioned, RE the diving, he said that they'd had trouble with the boat. Your brother John, where does John live? No comment. It's strange that you said there that the boat and the vehicle were yours. Would you like to give any comment as regards to that now? No comment. Have you subsequently sold either the boat or the vehicle? No comment. Gordon. Who was Gordon, Jack? No comment. Do you know anybody called Gordon? No comment. Well, the man that identified himself to the PC later on was Gordon Stevens. Do you know anybody by that name? No comment. Okay, now consequently it goes on, and I'm not quite sure where you were, whether you were still on the beach or what, but at 4:25 hours that day, I was present when a customs officer arrested Womes, Steele and Corey on suspicion of knowingly being concerned in the importation of a controlled drug. After caution, they made no reply. No comment. Okay. So you do some work for G&T Commercials, Jack. But you're not prepared at this stage to speak about who may or may not work at the premises or own the business. Will you tell us what vehicles you currently own? No. Or whether you own any boats or control any boats? A mobile phone? Do you have a mobile phone at all? You appreciate I have to ask these questions, Jack? No comment. Okay, yesterday the 13th of the 5th 96, you were arrested by customs officers at Unit 3 Norwich Road, Barham. Is that correct, Mr. Womes? Let me just point out for the tape that there's no comment and no gestures being made by Mr. Womes at all. Right, you were arrested whilst in the process of pressure washing a rigid inflatable boat that was on a trailer outside a unit, that unit, Unit 3 Norwich Road, Barham, and it was hitched up to an A-registered Land Rover. Is that correct? Who owns the boat that was on the trailer? On the 13th of the 5th 96 at Unit 3 Norwich Road, Barham, you were found cleaning a rigid inflatable boat. I have reason to believe that that boat was used in the importation of a controlled substance on the 13th of the 5th 96. I'm therefore requesting that you account for your actions and what you were doing with that boat on the 13th of the 5th 96. I must warn you that if you fail or refuse to do so, a court judge or jury may draw such inferences from your failure or refusal as appear proper. Right, no comment has been made. I would like to speak to you about your actions over the last few days, commencing really if we could start on the 11th of the 5th 96 and any business or whatever you have been doing at Unit 3 Norwich Road, Barham. Are you prepared to say anything concerning your actions from the 11th of the 5th onwards? Do you control that unit at G&T Commercials yourself? It's fair to say when you were arrested you had keys on yourself for those premises, is that correct? And I believe you referred to the officers that you had 2 sets of keys because the other people involved with controlling that property are away on holiday, is that correct? The rigid inflatable boat that you were cleaning, Jack, when you were arrested, is that your boat? Is that boat normally stored at your property? Did you or were you involved with the purchase of that vessel? On the 11th of the 5th 96, did you go to G&T Commercials at all during the day? Did you do anything in relation to the vessel, the rigid inflatable boat that was there when we arrested you that particular day at those premises? Did you meet somebody at the premises on that particular day, this Saturday, the 11th of the 5th? I move on to Sunday, the 5th of the 5th. Sunday the 12th of the 5th, I beg your pardon. Did you go to the premises, Unit 3, Norwich Road, Barham, on that day? On the 12th of the 5th, Sunday the 12th of the 5th, you were seen to arrive at the premises in a blue van. That blue van is registration Lima 98 Yankee Delta X-ray. Is that your vehicle, Jack? The vehicle arrived at G&T Commercials. This was observed by officers to make that quite clear to you. And it was observed that the rigid inflatable boat was removed from the premises at Unit 3 and was towed away by the blue Transit Lima 98 Yankee Delta X-ray. Was that you driving, Jack? The vehicle was seen to travel to a mobile service station on the A14 at Nacton Heath, where the vessel at this time was filled up with fuel. Was that you, Jack? At the petrol station, there was also 3 other people who associated with the van and the boat. Who were those people, Jack? Following the stop at the fuel station, the van towing the trailer was seen being followed by another vehicle which was a Jaguar, black Jaguar, and that was seen heading down to Levington Marina. It is believed that you were driving that blue transit van. Do you have any comment to make about that, Jack? Who were the 3 people who were in the Jaguar behind? At Levington Marina, the boat was launched with 2 people on board, and shortly thereafter the blue transit van with the empty boat trailer was seen to leave the marina. Was that you driving the transit van, Jack? Who had gone off on the boat? What was the purpose of their trip, Jack? Okay, following the departure from Levington Marina, the van with the empty boat trailer was seen to proceed to Staff House, Main Road, Brockford, and was reversing down the side of the house. As you previously mentioned, that is your home address, is that correct? Were you in the van? What were your actions after that, Jack? Did you leave the premises again that evening? At approximately 2 in the morning, on the night of the 13th, the rigid inflatable boat that had been launched on the trailer at Levington the previous day came into the beach in the vicinity of Clacton Pier, and 2 people were seen to meet that boat. Was that you, Jack? Later, on the 13th of the 5th, 96, at approximately 6:30 AM, the blue transit Lima 98 Yankee Delta X-ray was seen carrying an empty trailer on the A140 south of Brockford. and it was seen to go into Ipswich docks in the vicinity of Cliff Quay. The driver, which is believed to be yourself, was then involved together with others craning the rigid inflatable boat out of the water. Is that true? Who else was present, Jack? Why were you there? What had been the purpose of their trip, Jack? The vessel was seen to be put onto the trailer and was later seen being put into Unit 3 Norwich Road, Barham. That's where you are, Jack, is that correct? On the 13th of the 5th, when we arrested you, why were you cleaning the boat down? Jack, can you confirm that you own a mobile phone, 0836 215 646, of the number thereof, or deny that for me? You seem to be using it quite a lot the last weekend. Did you lend it out to anybody, Jack? What sort of hours do you normally keep? When you say you have a job, do you keep the same sort of hours as well as the majority of the working public? You work during the day and sleep during the night generally, is that correct? What do you know of a man called Mickey Steele? Lives here in Clacton or nearby here in Clacton? Or a Mr. Nichols from Braintree? Darren, I think? Or Russell Tate? Do you know Russell Tate, apart from the fact that he's the brother of one of the victims of the murders you're arrested for? Do you know that individual, Jack? Have you been recently to Mickey Steele's house in Great Bentley? I've got a list here of calls that have been made. It's not actually a definitive list yet, but there is one on its way from what I believe, from your mobile number 0836 215 646, which shows in particular that you've been phoning Mickey Steele's phone 0973 984 361, 368, with tremendous frequency over the last few days at all times of the day and night. Would that be correct? Times ranging from 1 o'clock in the morning, we've got 5 o'clock in the morning here, and also Michael Steele phoning your home address, is that correct? Again, strange times in the morning, Jack. Is there anything you'd like to say about that? See, for instance, Mr. Steele phones Mr. Womes at 5:58, about half an hour before Mr. Womes arrives at the docks, beg your pardon, leaves from home with the transit mentioned earlier and the trailer. Are you aware of what constitutes a conspiracy to commit a criminal offence, Jack? I mean, obviously your solicitor's the best person to advise, but maybe you've a different interpretation than I do. Yeah, I understand it, yeah. In its simplest form, I mean, really, it's a very simple piece of legislation, really. If Kevin and I, for instance, agree to a course of action, which if completed would amount to a criminal offence, then we at that time are already guilty of committing a conspiracy to commit that offence. Are you with me? I mean, really, it's that simple. If Kevin agrees to do something which may not in itself be an offence but furthers my commission of an offence, then he himself is guilty, or between us we formed a conspiracy to commit that offence. So, for instance, if I was going to take a boat across and import a load of cannabis, and I was going to drive across, in somebody's boat, if I said to Kevin, could I borrow your boat to go across in the middle of the night to the continent, bring in a load of cannabis, and then Kevin agreed, and then perhaps drove me down or picks up the boat afterwards, then Kevin is guilty of a conspiracy to commit the same offence with me. Just so there's no misunderstanding, Jack, and you know where you stand in relation to Mr. Steele, Mr. Nichols, Mr. Tate, and others. Okay, Jack, we're now going to move back to what we spoke about earlier, your arrest on Felixstowe Beach. Were you subsequently taken to Ipswich Police Station and I presumed you were interviewed, is that right? No comment. Were you released later on that day without charge? No comment. Okay, was your boat subsequently returned to you? No comment. I mean, who took the boat from the customs officers, Jack? No comment. Just a general question. What do you think led up to your arrest on that morning? Why do you think you were arrested? No comment. Why do you think that the police and customs officers came to that beach on that morning at 4:30, Jack? No comment. Do you believe that somebody had grasped on you? No comment. Do you understand what I mean by the term grasped? No comment. Do you understand, how do I put it, informed? Do you think that somebody told the police or the customs that you were importing cannabis that night? No comment. You understand the question, that's what I'm asking you. Do you understand the question or not? Yes, I understand the question, that you referred to me importing cannabis and I've denied it. I'm asking you now, I'm asking you whether you think that somebody informed on you that led up to your arrest that morning. Oh, no comment. Right, okay. Have you ever been to Mickey's house, or shall I say houses? No comment. Angels Green, Great Bentley as an address, a home address of Mickey Steele. Have you ever been there? No comment. I understand that Mr. Steele also has further addresses at Meadow Cottage in Great Clacton. Have you been there? No comment. Do you ever go abroad, Jack, for your work? No comment. Because I believe you've been abroad and met Mickey there, haven't you? No comment. You see, we have this bad cannabis deal. That's what I'm calling it, because it's the bad stuff. It's going back. Arrangements were made for this exchange, the cannabis to go back and the money to be returned on the continent. Do you know anything about that? No, I don't know anything about the cannabis going anywhere. I stated that earlier, didn't I? That I don't know anything about cannabis being imported. Do you use cannabis? No, I don't use cannabis. I don't drink, I don't smoke. Have you ever seen any cannabis? No, I haven't seen cannabis. So you don't smoke at all? No. Never smoked at all? No, I've never had one cigarette in my life. Better than I am. You see, we have this, like we said, this bad deal, that the importation went wrong. We have the anger of Tate, Tucker and Rolfe. Tate, Tucker and Rolfe, they're very annoyed that this deal's gone wrong with Mickey and what we believe you as well because of your involvement with Mickey Steele. And now there's this bad feeling between Tate, Tucker, Rolfe and Steele. And I would suggest to you that you know exactly what's going on because I believe that you are Mickey's right-hand man. You know exactly what's going on. You know exactly where Mick's coming from, exactly how he's feeling. He's getting really messed about by these blokes. He's getting fed up. They're getting too big for their boots. They need sorting out. They need slapping down a little bit, don't they really? They need putting in their place. Do you understand that? I don't really know what you're talking about because I haven't played any part in it, you know. I've stated that, so I mean, if you're giving me a story about whatever, then... Well, I'm suggesting to you, Jack, that you're Mick's right-hand man and that you'll run around for Mick, you know, all day long. And I'm just stating that I had nothing to do with the deal. You would run around for Mick. Oh, yeah, wonderful, Mick. You'd do anything for Mick. Run around, do this for him, do that for him. Look, I'm just trying to tell you that I had nothing to do with this cannabis. That's all I'm trying to say. Belgium. Funny that, innit, Belgium? Comes in a lot, really. That's where this handover is going to be, where the bad cannabis is going back to, where the money's going to exchange hands. Did you go out there for that at all? Would you have been on the continent around the 16th or 17th of the 11th last year? I've told you that I have nothing to do with the cannabis. That wasn't the question I asked you, Jack. No. I'm just making a statement. I had nothing to do with whatever you're implying I had something to do with. Now you keep on asking me questions, and I shall stop answering. I won't even answer to no comment, because I can't see it's got anything to do with me. But Jack, we have a duty and obligation to ask these questions, I'm sure you're aware. Yeah, alright. We're going to continue asking them until we've asked every question that we need to put to you, Jack, to give you the opportunity and fairness to say what you need to about the questions. Is that okay? Yeah, well, I can understand that. Now, if we don't ask the questions, then you don't get the opportunity to answer them. So we have to ask you the questions to give you the opportunity to answer them here and now whilst you're in the police station. Do you understand that? Yeah, but I haven't done anything wrong, so I can't see why I should make a statement or answer any questions. I am denying what you're implying, and I'm not going to answer any of your questions. Right, but it won't stop us asking them because we're obliged. We have a duty, Jack. Yeah, okay, right. Right, the actual question I asked was, would you have been on the continent around the 16th, 17th of the 11th, 95? That was the question I actually asked. I have nothing else to say. I shan't speak anymore. It seems to have got a bit of a reaction, that question, Jack. Because we've gone from, you know, answering some questions and others, that it seems to me that anything that's quite innocuous, an innocuous question such as whether you smoke, whether you drink, you're quite happy to answer that. Yet anything that may incriminate you, you don't want to answer at all. But I mean, that's fine, because the last question I think is very incriminating. Were you on the continent during those dates? And you said, I'm not going to answer any more questions. I just want that to go on record, as at that point you've actually said that. I think I made a statement I wasn't going to say anymore. That's the point I'm making, Jack. At that point at which you read that statement. I just said I wasn't going to answer any more questions. But what I'm getting on record is the point at which you made that statement is when we've asked you whether you were over in the continent on the 16th or 17th of the 11th. You've still got the opportunity to answer that question if you wish, Jack. No comment. Okay. Back at the beginning of the interview, Jack, when I read out the solicitor's brief, okay, I gave you a list of names, yours included, which we are alleging are involved in the importation of cannabis, okay? One of the names was Darren Nichols. Do you know Darren Nichols at all, Jack? Have you ever met Darren Nichols? Have you ever spoken to Darren Nichols? Have you ever been in the company of Darren Nichols, Jack? Because Darren Nichols seems to know you. He, in an interview, as I understand, has suggested that you were in or on the continent around the 16th or 17th of the 11th, 95, and I think to be precise, in Ostend, Belgium. So I invite you to make a comment as regards to that. Okay. Following on from that, whether you've ever been, and I want to make it clear that this is not something that's been covered during interview with Mr. Nichols, I'm asking the question based on a different source here, okay? Whether you've ever been to the Burlington Hotel in Ostend, Belgium. Do you understand the question, Jack? You see, Jack, not only does Nichols say that he saw you in Ostend, but saw Patrick Tate and Michael Steele, among others, and it was quoted as Darren seeing people having a bit of a jolly up. A bit of a good time. But poor old Darren would have been excluded from that, wouldn't he? Probably miffed him somewhat, put his nose out of joint. But then I wonder also whether Darren Nichols is another one of Mick's runaround boys. A bit like yourself, Jack. He'll send Darren off here, there and everywhere at his beck and call to do things. Is that right? Is Darren a bit of a soft touch? But then perhaps Mickey boy thinks that about you, really. Perhaps you're not quite as in his confidence as you think you are. See, Darren has suggested that this cannabis deal was somewhere in the region of 50 kilos, the bad part of it anyway. And I think it's also fair to say that we believe that we have some of it, if not all of that bad part, in police possession, dating back from the importation in November, and it has been in our possession for some time, Jack. You see, Jack, it's believed that around £70,000 or thereabouts was the amount of money that was returned to Michael Steele and Pat Tate whilst they were on the continent. Do you know anything about that? Were you there when all that was going on? Have you ever heard of the Mullock brothers? Ever heard of them, Jack? Because Mr. Tate, Patrick Tate, the deceased I should say, is believed to have been in debt to them for £40,000 because of this cannabis deal, and he was getting a bit of pressure put on him. Patrick Tate didn't want to give them their £40,000 back because Patrick Tate, Mr. Tate, I think believed he'd become, shall we say, for the want of a better word, one of the big drug dealers in this part of Essex. But we believe that Patrick Tate, not only was he not giving the Mullocks their money back, but he was also saying, I haven't got my money back from Mickey Steele. So again, there is some bad feeling coming from other people as regards to Mr. Steele, and as far as we're concerned, you also, because of your involvement with Mickey. Anything to say about that, Jack? I mean, what's Mick going to do about it? He's getting an awful lot of pressure put on him, isn't he? He's saying to Pat that he's got this big chance of a job lined up, ripping off somebody else's gear. Have you heard about that? Any of that? Did Mick tell you about that, Jack? Allegedly, it was to do with 30 kilos of cocaine, and Mickey was going to bring that in by plane. Do you know anything about that deal? Being Mick's right-hand man, I suggest that he'd confide that in you, Jack. The idea was that Tate and Tucker would rob this firm of the cocaine, meaning the people that were financing the deal for Mick to go out and bring the stuff in. When it landed, they, Tate and Tucker, were going to have it for themselves because they were big league now. Somewhere along the line, this all gets rather clouded. Mickey's getting rather concerned as to whether he can trust Tate and Tucker. Did he tell you that at all, Jack? Did Mick say he was getting a bit concerned about Pat Tate and Tucker? He didn't know whether he could trust them anymore, is that right? Because we believe that Mick was getting some information back from a young lady who used to be involved with Pat Tate. Do you know a girl called Sarah Saunders, Jack? Have you met her? You see, if you listen carefully, Jack, this is how I see a motive developing for the murder of Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe. They are all involved with Michael Steele primarily, but through him you are involved in a web of drugs importing. I feel we have substantial evidence of that, certainly in association in the amount of evidence between them and you and Michael Steele. Speaking on a daily if not hourly basis, and meeting all the time, sometimes speaking 3 or 4 times within 10 minutes of each other on the phone. Very, very close. Seem to visit each other's addresses, seen with each other's vehicles, etc. Now, Michael Steele and yourself get arrested, don't you, on the 8th of the 11th? And really, that is a very, very close shave of the authorities. Michael Steele has previously served a lengthy prison sentence for importation, and the night that you and him get arrested, who else was in custody elsewhere in a different part of Essex but Mr. Patrick Tate? Now, Steele and yourself are interviewed. You both come out and Steele is trying to work out just how you've been arrested. You're probably doing the same, the pair of you. And you think, Christ, oh, Pat stuck me up here. I wonder if Pat's informed on me while he's been in custody. Gets your mind ticking. You start wondering. Then Mickey Steele hears that Pat and Tony are getting fed up with him. They've had enough. It's going wrong, isn't it? Loss of respect all round, including yourself. And they start talking about perhaps doing Mickey Steele in, killing him. This comes to Michael Steele's ears, we believe, and you and him hatch out a plan to kill Tucker and Tate. Maybe Rolfe, maybe just because he's with them. We can also, we believe, say that at the time they were killed, Mickey Steele had taken a lot of money from them for drugs which clearly, if they were all dead, he would never have to return or give them the drugs. You see, there's a three-pronged motive there, Jack. 1, he thinks he's been grasped on, informed on by Tate. 2, he thinks that Tate is out to get him anyway, largely as a result of a relationship that's developed between himself and Sarah Saunders. And 3, he's got a lot of their money, which he doesn't need to return if they're dead. And that is exactly where we see you, and where we see the events leading up to their murder. So there's no misunderstanding about where we see you within the framework of it, Jack. Now, we've held that belief for some considerate time, in particular with the motives that I've outlined, and as you know from the briefing note that your solicitors had, and the discussion we've had today, Mr. Nichols is offering up an explanation to his part in the importation and the murders of Pat, Craig and Tony. His account implicates you and Michael Steele as the killers. He categorically states that he knows that you and Michael killed Pat Tate, Craig Rolfe and Tony Tucker. He has admitted his involvement in those murders and has detailed to a great degree the events of the evening of the 6th of the 12th 95 before and after the murders of Pat, Craig and Tony. That is why we are asking you these questions about whether you know Mickey, whether you know Pat, Craig and Tony, because I want you to be in no doubt about that. Do you understand what I'm saying, Jack? Yeah, I would like to say something actually. You're saying that someone said that I killed someone, yeah? Yeah. And I'm using your words categorically. I did not kill anybody. No, I didn't have any part to do with any murder. Right. And that's what I'm saying. Right. Or importation, as I've stated earlier. Right. This where someone's saying that I've killed someone worries me. I've got a family, 2 kids and a wife. I'll never see them again if, for instance, I was found guilty of something I didn't commit. It worries me. Right. I did not kill anybody, and I just wanted to get that across. Right, so why do you think that Darren Nichols says you did then? I'm not going to answer any more questions because it worries me so much. Do you have an explanation, Jack? We're back to where we started, aren't we? We're back to when we get to the meat of the discussion, the fact that 3 men have been murdered. You say I didn't do it. But you're not prepared to discuss the details around it. Why not? Do you have something to hide, Jack? You say it worries you, so tell us what worries you about it. Talk about it. You see what I'm saying? It's all very well saying you didn't do it. I mean, it's easy to say, isn't it? Look, if I get talking, I might get myself in trouble. When I know I haven't done anything wrong, that's why I don't talk. I've explained earlier on when you started talking to me about certain charges or certain allegations, I think, of drug importation. I'm categorically denying all these charges. I've nothing to do with them. That's why I daren't answer any questions, just in case how can I put it, my sort of incompetence. I might get myself put in prison for a very long time. Incompetence? I know I haven't done anything. What do you mean by your own incompetence? Me own incompetence in talking to you? Well, explain what you mean, Jack. I don't understand what you mean by your own incompetence. I have a job of sentences and... But Jack, you've met a number of police officers since you've been in custody. You've met police officers before. One of them is making a statement at the moment. You've had perfectly proper conversation with them about 4-wheel drive vehicles whilst you've been in the police station with the jailer here, which he's quite entitled to do. You were talking to 3 police officers for most of the morning yesterday. Nobody has mentioned anything about incompetence, which in itself is a big word. I mean, it's like you are implying that you can't hold a conversation. I've been speaking to you, Jack. I don't understand why all of a sudden, like hours, days into being in custody, you're now saying, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not actually very competent. I'm incompetent. I just don't understand that, Jack. I'm sorry, but I ain't saying anymore. Right. I explained it in my words. Yeah, but you said that you're incompetent, Jack. Right. Look, I hear what you're saying, but I really don't know whether I understand it. I don't know whether you're suggesting, and I don't mean it in a derisory sense, but I don't know whether you're suggesting that we're going to ask you trick questions or come up with something that is quite outrageous that really we should have quite rightly told your solicitor about. We've told you at the beginning of the very first interview, and I think I did it at the beginning of this one as well, that if you want to stop the interview at any time and ask your solicitor about something that we bring up, then we will do that. We're not allowed to mislead you or lie to you and ask you trick questions, you know? We're asking you simple, straightforward questions, Jack. I mean, you've said that you didn't kill anybody. What you haven't done is said to me, I wasn't with Darren Nichols and Michael Steele on the night of the 6th of the 12th, 95, or I wasn't in the Volkswagen Passat that night, for instance. Things like that. You haven't said to me where you were on the night of the 6th of the 12th, 95. Have you ever owned a Volkswagen Passat motor vehicle, Jack? Do you understand the question? I don't hear you denying you understand the question, Jack, so I assume you do, and I'm going to ask you again. Have you ever owned a Volkswagen Passat motor vehicle or been given one for a period of time? Right. We just want to go back and clarify some bits and pieces after this morning's first interviews. First of which, Jack, is again relating back to the events of the 8th of the 11th, 95, when we say, and we have obviously documented evidence, that you were arrested on the beach at Felixstowe at 4:25 AM on Wednesday. Now, I read to you part of PC Cohen's statement as regards to your arrest and what you were doing there, and we spoke as regards to the boat. Now, he actually asked you, if I remember rightly, as to whether you own a boat. Do you own a boat, Jack? The boat that was there, which was the Humber Rib boat, I will ask you once again, do you own that boat? Do you own that Humber Rib boat that was taken into possession by police and customs officers on that very morning? The reason I ask, Jack, is that we have a statement here of PC 960 Paul Quick, who's on duty that morning in company with PC Cohen, and I'm going to read to you part of his statement. He's already detailed the fact that he was called to that area with PC Cohen as a result of 3 men landing a boat in suspicious circumstances. And when they arrived there, they saw a Range Rover, and attached to it was a trailer with a large inflatable boat. After about a minute, a white male approached us from the direction of the sea defences and said, "Oh, I thought someone was trying to steal my motor." PC Quick goes on to say, "I now know this man as Jack Womes, and he stated that the Range Rover belonged to a brother and that he owned the boat." I ask you to make some sort of comment as regards to that, Jack. Okay. That boat was subsequently taken into possession by customs officers. Now, we have spoken to a senior officer by the name of Dave Hill, a senior customs officer that is, that you, Jack, went and recovered that boat from him and signed for it as the owner, which again I'll ask you, do you own that boat? Once again, I'll ask you to comment on the fact that you were arrested that morning with Michael Steele, in company with Michael Steele and Peter Corey. Your boat, and I shall call it your boat for the purposes of this interview, Jack, was forensically examined, and do you know what was found in the boat? Traces of cannabis were found in the boat, Jack. How do you think they could have got there then? Well, you know, don't you? You know that the boat was used, as we've said all along, for the importation of cannabis, and there is a scientist stating that traces of cannabis were found in that boat. Your boat, Jack. Do you want to comment on that? Okay, let's go back then, shall we, to being abroad on the continent, Jack, because that seemed to cause you some sort of dismay when we asked you about whether you had been on the continent on or around the 16th or 17th of November 95. Let me remind you that we're suggesting that your partner in this importation business, Mr. Steele, was out in Ostend at this time with Tate, Tucker and Rolfe, or was certainly returning money from the bad cannabis deal in Ostend. You were there, weren't you? As I've said, Mr. Nichols stated that you were there. Do you wish to comment on that, Jack? Were you there or not, Jack? Did you help bring back some of that money, some of that 70-odd thousand pounds that was returned? Did you help bring some of that back? Because there was quite a few people there, wasn't there, really? Split all the money up so nobody has one great big large amount of money on them. I suggest that you were there, and I think that you were there for the very reason that I've just said, Jack, to bring the money back or help bring the money back. Do you want to comment on that? G&T Commercials, which is once again where I say I believe you have some connection with, either as an employee or maybe something more. The premises is situated at Barham, and I think Scarlet Tipping also has something to do with it. Do you know Scarlet Tipping? Because the mobile phone that you use, I think, is down to Scarlet Tipping. You use that phone, and I believe we've taken possession of that phone on your arrest, Jack. You do work for G&T Commercials, Jack, don't you? And you use that phone. I believe that's where you were actually arrested, washing a boat, the same boat that we've been talking about. I'll just read you a little something here, hang on. Yes, here it is. This is a statement of DC Phil Norton, who was on duty in company with DC Clark, and I'll read you this. About 10:50 hours, the same named company of DC Clark and I were at G&T Commercials Barham. I looked through the windows at the rear of the workshop with the green doors. I could see a leisure-type speedboat on a trailer with a cover over it. I could also see another boat, orange in colour, of inflatable nature with a rigid bottom. It had a single Yamaha engine outboard motor on the back. It was sitting on a trailer bearing the registration mark N for November 551, Bravo Oscar Oscar. Do you want to pass any comment on that, Jack? Do you know that registration number, Jack? How strange. I mean, we would be amazed to know if that vehicle goes down to Mr. Steele, Michael Steele of Great Bentley. And, surprise, surprise, it does belong to Mr. Steele, down to his red Toyota Hilux motor vehicle, and lo and behold, there's your boat sitting on that. Do you want to pass any comment on that, Jack? The same boat that the cannabis traces were found in November after your arrest? Do you still maintain that you have nothing to do with importing cannabis? Is that still your story, Jack? Or are you not going to say any more? There's a lot of facts there, isn't there, flying in the face of what you said earlier? Awful lot of facts. Why aren't you telling us the truth, Jack? Why don't you feel that you can tell us the truth? So your boat has been used then to import cannabis. We think we've got that cannabis now. We have had for some time. We've recently recovered 150 kilos of cannabis from Michael Steele's mother's house. Why don't you tell us the truth? Why say you're not involved, Jack? Do you understand the allegations we're now putting to you? These things that we've defined since your last interview about your previous arrest, and the cannabis and Mr. Steele. Do you understand what we're saying to you? Let there be no confusion, Jack. I have absolutely nothing to do with it. Okay, before I crack on again, Jack, I just want to make sure, is there anything in the 3 previous interviews today that you have not understood at all? I don't think so. Well, be sure, because if there is, then we'll try and clarify it now. If not, then we'll carry on. No, carry on. Okay. Television, Jack. Do you watch a lot of television? Newspapers? Do you read a lot of newspapers? Radio? Do you listen to the radio? Are you interested in current topics, the news of the day if you like? The only reason I ask all these questions, Jack, is that I'm going to start talking to you now about the 6th of the 12th 95, there or thereabouts of 1995. I just want it clear in your mind what we're talking about, Jack. I want to talk to you about the events that led up to the 6th of the 12th 95 and happened on and around that time, okay? Because 3 men were killed, murdered in a Range Rover down a dark, secluded country lane in Rettendon, and I think it would be fair to say that it made the national news. Radio, TV, newspapers. Do you remember that being in the news, the radio, in the newspapers? Because I'm going to ask you, Jack, if you can account for where you were, first of all, on or around the 6th of the 12th 95. Can you tell me where you were? Because I believe that you were down that dark, secluded country lane in Rettendon on the 6th of the 12th 95, and I think you're responsible for the murders of Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe. I invite you to make a comment on that. You are absolutely mistaken. That's the only comment I want to make. I'm mistaken. You don't want to expand on that at all, Jack? Did you murder Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe? Absolutely not. Were you present when they were murdered? Absolutely not. Where were you on the 6th of the 12th, 95? Can you remember the day that we're talking about? Can you remember where you might have been that evening? No, I can't. Have you ever been to Rettendon at all? Do you know that area? No. Would you remember, Jack, being in a leafy lane? It's the only way to describe it, really. In December 1995, in the area of Rettendon Essex. I'd remember if I murdered someone, if that's what you're trying to imply. I've stated all the time you've been firing questions at me that I did not commit that terrible crime. Right. You keep asking me questions on it, and I'll keep saying the same answer, because I don't know anything else. Right, okay. I accept that, Jack, and I have listened to what you say. We have got a duty to ask you these questions, Jack, and this caution is as much for us as it is for you, okay? And it says that you do not have to say anything. You don't. It also says that if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court, it may harm your defence. Now, if you're not questioned, then you don't get the opportunity to either mention it or not mention it, which has implications, Jack, to both of us. That's why we ask the questions, and I accept what you say to me. I know nothing about it. I was not involved in these murders. But when we ask you where you were you in Rettendon on the 6th of the 12th? I haven't had an answer yet for 1995. I think I've said my piece. I don't take that as an answer to the question. That's a saying. You think you've said your piece. Well, I'm sorry. It's best I don't answer. Okay. It's best you don't answer. That's what you said. Why is that? I have to ask you the question again to avoid any confusion, Jack. Have you ever, or were you, in December 1995 in Rettendon at all? I have never been to Rettendon. Right, we've cleared that up now. I'm very grateful for clearing that up. So we've established that then Mr. Womes has not been to Rettendon. So I take it that, Jack, that you know where Rettendon is. Do you know where Rettendon is on a map? Is it possible that you could have gone to Rettendon and not known that you're in the village or the area of Rettendon because maybe you don't know Essex or that part of Essex that well? You see, because we have a version of events, an account by Mr. Nichols, and I think it would be fair to say that a great part of what Mr. Nichols has given as his account of that night, certainly corroborates or falls in line with a long-running police inquiry. My colleague and I will be putting that version of events to you, Jack, Mr. Nichols' account. And once again, it's going to be your chance to give your account of that night, challenge what Mr. Nichols says, and say that it's not right. This is your chance to turn around and say what Mr. Nichols says is a load of old tosh. A load of old rubbish, let's put it in those terms, shall we? So let's start on the 6th of December 1995, Wednesday night, where Mr. Steele, Mickey Steele, contacts Mr. Nichols, and I was going to say request that Nichols comes to meet him, but I think that's probably the wrong phraseology, the wrong wording, shall we say. I think it's more like Mr. Steele says, you will come and meet me at a place called Ron Parkinson's in Marks Tay. Do you know of that place, Jack? I think Ron Parkinson's, for the benefit of the tape for anyone who's listening to it, is a motorcycle shop in Marks Tay, and Marks Tay is situated on the A12 just outside Colchester. Do you know that, Jack? Nichols stated that he got there at around 17:50 on that night, where Mickey Steele was waiting for him in his red Toyota Hilux, index number which we already know, November 551 Bravo Oscar Oscar. Steele, according to Nichols' version of events, tells him that he and Mickey Steele and yourself, Jack, are going to do a bit of business. They're going to deal with Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe. Is that right? You're actually going to do a bit of business. What did he mean by that, Jack? Now, again, Mr. Nichols states that he was with Mr. Steele in the Hilux, and you, Jack, pull up in a B-Reg VW Passat motor vehicle, which apparently used to be Nichols, and I think either you bought it off of him or something like that. Is that right, Jack? Have you ever owned a B-Reg VW Passat? Have you ever bought a motor vehicle off of Darren Nichols? Is what Darren Nichols says correct? Did you turn up on Wednesday the 6th of the 12th 95 at Ron Parkinson's at Marks Tay in a B-Reg VW Passat? Now, Mr. Nichols is saying that he never had a choice. He arrived there obviously because he's scared of Mr. Steele for some unknown reason. He's there, and no sooner as he's got into the Toyota Hilux than you pull up in the B-registered VW Passat, and you're away. You're off down the A12, going to do a bit of business. And you drive down to the Halfway House public house on the A127. Is that correct? You arrive at around 18:30 that night, Jack. Do you remember that? Is Mr. Nichols correct? It's not a very nice night that night, is it? With the snow falling. It had been a cold, wet, horrible, snowy winter's night. You must remember that. Mr. Nichols does. You're at the Halfway House, Jack, with Mickey and Darren Nichols. Nichols was told to get out of the Hilux by Mickey and gets into the VW Passat with you. Is that right? In fact, he actually gets into the driver's seat. And as he's doing this, Jack, he remembers a Range Rover pulling up. The Range Rover which we now know contained Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe, because they were all there to do a bit of business. Do you remember a Range Rover pulling up, Jack? You drive off in your VW Passat, telling Nichols where to go, what to do. So really like you're telling Nichols what to do now. He's your underline. You tell him what to do, you're in charge of him. Is that right? You do actually tell him to stop at one point, don't you? You actually tell him to stop because you want to put some false plates on the VW Passat. Now, why would you want to do that, Jack? Or maybe this is all lies, is it? Is this all a pack of lies? Absolutely a pack of lies. Is there any truth in any of it so far from your perspective? No truth whatsoever. Right, we'll carry on then. Well, why Darren Nichols is saying this, I mean, he must have his reasons, but I just can't think. What do you think his reasons are, Jack? Sorry, I can't think of any reason. I don't know why. Do you know him? It's a cold winter's night, Jack. A bit of snow and these stick-on plates, they won't stick on, will they? So you don't bother in the end. So off you go again and you tell Nichols to stop the car. You're going to get out, or you get out, and you tell Nichols that he's got to drive off and you've got to stay in the area, because you'll phone him. You'll phone Nichols to tell him when to come back and pick him up. Do you recall that? I believe that you'd certainly have gotten out of the motor vehicle, the VW Passat, somewhere near the lane that led to the murder scene. Mr. Nichols tells us that you were wearing some dark clothing that night, and that you got out and you had a plumber's-sized bag, is what he described, with you. Do you own a tool bag, plumber's bag, something like that, Jack? You disappear, Nichols drives off. Not for long, but he drives off and states that he's having trouble getting a signal on his mobile phone. It was a bit hilly around that area, and obviously it was a bit difficult to pick up a signal on the phone, but he kept moving his position, not for too long, and his phone rings and you speak to him, Jack. You tell him to come and pick him up where you've been dropped off. Remember that? Is that true? Anyway, Nichols goes back to that area where he'd dropped you off and you get into the car. And Nichols says that you say to him that Mickey's going to come and join us in a minute. Do you recall saying that, Jack? Did you get into the VW Passat with Nichols and say Steele's going to come and join us in a minute? Mickey did appear, didn't he, Jack? He was wearing overalls. In fact, I think Mr. Nichols stated that you were both wearing sets of overalls. Mickey comes up, gets into the car. You've still got your bag that you left the car with. And Mick gets into the car and he's got a bag with him. Do you know what was in that bag, Jack? Well, Mr. Nichols was there, and he sees what he describes as a side-by-side shotgun in Mickey's bag. Is that right? At some point, Mickey actually turns round and says, "That's sorted those fucking cunts out. We won't be having no more shit with them." Do you remember that, Jack? Who was he talking about? He's talking about Tony Tucker, Pat Tate and Craig Rolfe, wasn't he? You just been down that lane at Rettendon, Jack, and blown them to bits with your shotgun. Is that what happened? 3 unarmed men, sat in a Range Rover, when you come out of the bushes, out of the dark on that snowy night. They were in that Range Rover which went down that lane, and Mickey was in the back, because that was all pre-arranged with him, wasn't it? All pre-arranged with your mate, Mr. Steele. He got out of that Range Rover, out of the back offside door, and you were so pumped up that night, Jack. You were ready for that night. 2 guns you had. You thrust one shotgun into Mickey's hands and you pushed him out the way. Those are the words described by Mr. Nichols that you said in the car. And Steele had described, "He nearly pushed me out the way to get to them." And then you fired 7 rounds into them, Jack, into their head. No messing, eh? Because you were really fired up for that night, weren't you? Mickey prearranged it. Because your mate Mick was in danger, wasn't he? Heaven forbid if anything should happen to your mate Mickey Steele. Because that's what he told you. I'm sure it wasn't just go and kill these 3 people, Tony Tucker, Pat Tate and Craig Rolfe. They were planning to take him out. They were going to kill your mate Mick. That couldn't be right. Mick hasn't got the balls to do it himself, had he? I'll have to get my mate to do it. Get him to come down there. Is that how it went, Jack? Is that what happened? Did Mickey put one in them after they were probably dead? Pat Tate still twitching a bit. Just to show you could do it. Just to show you could, weren't it, really? You'd done all the hard work, Jack, hadn't you? You'd taken the real risk. But he just went round to the near side of the car and fired one into Pat Tate. He was, I would think, probably slouched in the back of the car by that time. True or not, Jack? Absolutely not true. What you've described to me is a horrific thing. It is horrific, I quite agree with you, Jack. It's, well, heinous, isn't it? 3 defenceless men get slayed like that by somebody with a shotgun? Absolutely. And I denied it all the way along in your questioning, and I've listened to your, how do you put it, story you're reading to me from your notebook. It's not a story, Jack. It's an account given by Mr. Nichols. All right, an account. Well, I'm just putting it in my own words. I've listened to it. I can't believe the reason why Mr. Nichols would say such a thing about me, and I could not do such a thing. The man's got to be lying. Were you with him that night, Jack? I've stated all the way along I don't know anything about it. So if I'm saying I don't know anything about it, how could I have been there? I asked whether you were with Darren Nichols on the night of the murders. I've just answered it in my own way. I couldn't have been there. That's the answer. That's the answer I'm going to give you. Were you with Mickey Steele that night? I've stated I don't know nothing about it. I'm asking you a question, Jack. Were you with Mickey Steele? Well, I couldn't have been, because I don't know nothing about it. The night when Pat was killed, and Tony was killed, and Craig was killed. I'm sorry, I've just answered that. If I'm saying that I'm not there, and I don't know nothing about it, how could I have been with anybody? If somebody's saying that they're there, and I'm saying I'm not there, that's just my interpretation. It's the best I can do. Alright, Jack, then, let's just recap. You're saying that just for the last half an hour, what we've been talking about, that you're saying that you were not and have not been to Rettendon. I don't know anything that has been said, I don't know. It's all lies, halfway through you said. Well, it's got to be, I mean, I can't think why Darren is lying. He must be lying. He must have a reason. Well, I just don't know. Why would he pick on you then if he's lying, Jack? I mean, it upsets me that someone has implicated me in killing 3 people. I mean, I don't want to carry on talking about it because it's a horrendous thing for someone to actually point me out as killing 3 men. It seems to me, Jack, that we're just getting another reason why you shouldn't answer the questions that are being put to you. We've had various reasons over the last couple of days. Well, can I say this? And I will say this once more. I don't know nothing about it, so I can't answer your questions. Well, you can answer questions like, do you know Mickey Steele, can't you? Yeah, I suppose I could, but you're not. No, Well, yeah, it upsets me to talk about what you're implicating or somebody's implicating. Well, make no mistake, that's what we're implicating as well. Make no mistakes about that, Jack. I'm not trying to say that someone else is just saying this and it's just a tall story or something. What I'm saying is I actually firmly believe the account that we have just given to you with, I believe, good reason. So let's not sort of think it's somebody in another police station just spouting it out and we'll just talk about that. What I'm saying is we are putting this to you because we believe that it is fact, and I'm asking for your comments, Jack. Now, I accept what you say. It is a shocking thing, a very shocking thing. Allegations don't come much stronger than this, right? But we've been asking you questions now, and you're saying to me that you're shocked by it. You've been under arrest now for these offences for 2 days. It's not come straight out of the blue, these allegations. I arrested you, I think, on Tuesday morning, early Tuesday lunchtime-ish, for the 3 murders. And you've been asked since then questions like, do you know Mickey Steele? Do you know Darren? And I take it from the way that you've answered the questions about why should Darren say that you do have some knowledge of Darren Nichols. We're asking you now, do you know Darren Nichols? Well, you started off now, I think, do I have any comments on it? I have no comment. Right, do you know Darren Nichols? I have no comment on this. I'm asking you now whether you know Darren Nichols. That's the question. I'm not saying, I'm making no comment. Right. You said, I think, Jack, that you are shocked by this crime. I think my colleague called it a heinous crime. It is a shocking crime, isn't it? Even more shocking, I suppose, that you should be or have the finger pointed at you. And my colleagues alike were shocked by the violence of it. And I think the media, the press, the newspapers, TV, radio were shocked by it too. In fact, they were so shocked by it that they thought it was national headline news. Now, don't think I'm being rude here, I'm not. But you're not a hermit, Jack, are you? You watch the TV? Because I think I remember you saying you like the TV, but not too keen on the newspapers. Do you not recall this being on the news, on the TV, in the newspaper? See, my way of thinking is that if this is a total pack of lies, Jack, I would be pulling my hair out to try and think, where was I on the 6th of December? Because I can remember it being on the TV, I can remember where I was. But you sit there and look at me, Jack, and you don't say anything. Shocking, shocking crime. But you don't know where you were that night. These 3 were friends of yours. They were people you knew, were they not? I have no comment on the subject. If we go back to the account that Mr. Nichols was giving, you, Steele, Nichols are all in that VW Passat. You drive out of the lane, he says you turn left towards Rolfe, and generally after some driving you end up at a public house which we think is the Traveller's Joy, or it may have been renamed the Hungry Horse Public House, near Raleigh Railway Station. Do you recall that? Have you ever been to that pub near Rettendon? Nickel states that with you and Steele in the car, he parks next to Mickey's red Toyota Hilux, which is there already in the public house car park. Mick gets out of the car, he takes his overalls off in the car park. I think you had a bit of blood on you, Jack, didn't you? You had to sort that out. Did you have some surgical gloves? Did you wear surgical gloves that night, Jack? Do you have access to surgical gloves for work to stop your hands getting messed up? Do you ever wear surgical gloves in your work, Jack? Okay, that was the buzzer sounding. We're near the end of the tape. The date is still Thursday, the 16th of the 5th, 96, and the time by my watch is now 21:30 hours. This interview is now concluded.